It's nice to begin in another Zoom room. It was a very heartwarming and a bit emotional session we're coming from. But we are in the last, but definitely another exciting session of the Gifts Towards General Meeting or SGM 2023. We've just seen an advertisement, our promo video for the gifts, advancing fiscal transparency for development online course. It's a vital resource for understanding and enhancing fiscal openness at both the national and global level. So this course hosts a treasure trove of knowledge from basic concepts to complex strategies, and I highly recommend it to everyone eager to make a difference in the field of fiscal transparency. It's available in English and French for now, as shared by Raquel, but we're working to produce it in Spanish and Arabic, so we'll keep you posted once these new versions are ready. Now, uh, I'm Marian Fabian. I'm the Communications and Outreach Coordinator of GIFT, and I'm thrilled to welcome you all again to this last but pivotal 2023 GIFT SGM session on the guidelines for digital solutions for public financial management. This session is co-organized by GIFT and the Fiscal Affairs Department of the International Monetary Fund. And today's session promises to be a really good deep dive into the innovative world of the PFM, just to ensure that we are let me just go to the next slide. You already know this. We've discussed this in many on the other three gifts word session. There you go. Just a brief house rules. We have interpretation available in English, Spanish, and French. So you can select your preferred language by clicking on the interpretation icon at the bottom of your Zoom panel. Please let us know if there's any technical issues on the interpretation. You can hear the language of your choice well. Also, please don't forget to rename yourself and your organization. The example is flashed on the slide. Sample Marian Fabian, gift, or Juan Pablo Guerrero, gift. And if you're joining us by phone, it might be difficult to rename yourself. So let us know, message me, message anyone from the coordination team, and we can assist you with renaming. Of course, we love seeing your faces in the Zoom room, so it would be great if you all keep your video on. But if you're mobile or facing connection issues, no worries, you can opt to turn your video off. Also, just when you're not speaking on mic, remember to mute your microphone to minimize background noise. We also recommend that you use headphones for better audio quality. For our presenters and for those who will provide intervention later during our interaction, we request that you speak slowly so we can aid our interpreters and facilitate interpretation smoothly. Just a quick trivia, this session has the highest interest in registration rates among the SGM 2023 sessions. So I'm sure you're excited to listen and engage with us. So to facilitate smooth interaction, we have allotted around 20 minutes for question and answer with our panelists and for open discussion after all presentations are done. We encourage you to use the Zoom chat box to share your questions and insights. This is a very exciting topic. And during this interaction time, you can also use the reaction button to raise your hand if you want to ask a question or share brief insights on mic. Please note that, like all sessions in the SGM 2023, this one will be recorded for documentation and dissemination purposes later on. Also, don't worry about getting copies of session presentations. We will be sharing all session materials after the SGM 2023 through our November newsletter to be released next week. Now, with that, let me segue to the main session. Oops, sorry, this is the wrong one. It's the wrong slide. Today, we're focusing on a critical area of public financial management. During our Stewards General meeting opening session, Raquel Ferreira from our gift team and Lorena Rivera of the IMF kindly shared briefly about the release of the Digital Solutions Guidelines for Public Financial Management, or PFM. It's one of the most recent publications of the IMF. These guidelines aims to serve as useful resource for policymakers and practitioners involved in PFM digitization efforts. We know that with good internal and digital systems, we can facilitate more meaningful fiscal transparency and participation, and we're here to discuss how to do this exactly with the help of this new published resource on the topic from IMF. So without further ado, I believe we can start. So to provide more details and enlighten us on this new guidelines, the Digital Solutions Guidelines for PFM, I'm delighted to call the authors of this publication, Sailendra Patanayak, Deputy Division Chief, and Lorena Rivera Del Paso, Technical Assistance Advisor from the IMF Fiscal Affairs Division. To you, Lorena and Sailendra. Please stop sharing my screen.
Thank you. Thank you, Marianne. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead, Sailendra.
Yeah. Thank you, Marianne, and welcome all the representatives from General Stewards. Good morning and good evening to everyone. As Marianne said, it's a privilege for us from the IMF, Lorena and I, and Chloe, who will also be contributing to this presentation. We'll be sharing with you basically the recent publication, some of the highlights, some of the key principles of the PFM digitalization guidelines. Next slide, please. So in this presentation, we will first give you a bit of a snapshot to give you a bit of a context about the global embracement of digital public financial management in general, and what are the trends, what are the risks and challenges some of the countries are facing, and some successes and failures, a little bit of snapshot on that. Then we'll move to the guidelines itself, and then we will explain to you the framework and then some of the key principles. And after that, we will talk a bit about how to apply this guidelines framework to develop and implement digital solutions in the public financial management area. And then finally, we'll talk briefly about how we can collaborate with all of you, from the IMF to, help you digitalize the public financial management. Next slide, please. So just to give a bit of a trend, as most of you know, digitalization in public financial management is not something new. I mean, it started long ago. In fact, in late 80s, mid 80s, with the mainframe computers, when the mainframe computers came in, it kind of started. And then when countries have access to the personal computers, and then client server technology came in. So then many users could actually use the systems, could log into the systems and use simultaneously. So therefore, over the years, one of the key solutions of public financial management digitalization was financial management information system. And this started in 1984. And as you would see in this chart, which is taken from the database, 2022 database, GovTech database of the World Bank, most countries are currently kind of having financial management information systems. And as you would see in this chart, most of the developments of these systems happened during 90s and 2000s, late 2000s. So almost like out of 193 countries are currently already having these systems. Now, next slide, please. While most of the countries are having these systems, FMIS, Financial Management Information Systems, the different functions that are covered by these systems, you see in this chart, the coverage of functions is not all, for all the functions, it's not the same. The core PFM functions, for example, budget and accounting, debt management, these are covered also so on the revenue side, customs management, tax management, these core functions are also covered in general. But when we look at some of the auxiliary functions like treasury single account or public investment management, the coverage is not that great. I mean, it's still below the core PFM functions. Next slide, please. Now, after giving you a little bit of a trend about the evolution of financial management information systems in the PFM area, this chart basically shows you, based on some of the insights we got from survey which we did from the IMF site covering about 30 countries as part of the workshops we did. As you would see, some of the concerns expressed by the country authorities are the following. As you would see, while the systems have gone ahead, most countries have these systems, they sort of operate in a little bit in a silo manner. And there are one of the key concern is about lack of connectivity and interoperability amongst the systems. And as you would see, this came across, this chart shows also the 3 regions in the world: Africa, Asia, and Latin America. And the concern about interconnectivity and interoperability is kind of widespread across all regions. And the next concern is cybersecurity concerns. And the third one, as you would see, is about while the systems have evolved, the needs of the users have not been really been taken into account in updating the systems as in the same way. And this is more pronounced, as you would see, in Latin America, who actually started with monolithic systems in the beginning, and where the updates are kind of a bit of a slow. Next slide, please. So a little bit going into more, elaborating a bit more on the interoperability and connectivity issue amongst the systems. Here you would see that the core PFM functions like the budget preparation, budget execution, treasury management, they are kind of sort of broadly interoperable. But when we look at, as I said, the auxiliary systems like public investment management or other systems like payroll, e-procurement, etc., they are not so much well connected and for data exchange with the core systems. Even within the core systems also, sometimes countries have developed different modules, so there are also issues in terms of interoperability and data exchange. Next slide, please. So in terms of fiscal data exchange, this slide shows you that, as I said, the core FMIS functions are largely interoperable. Almost 72% of them exchange data amongst themselves through separate interfaces, or because some of the functionalities are perhaps kind of centralized. Therefore, the data is centralized. But when we look at some of the other functions like treasury single account, for example, only 55% are, for example, linked to central bank systems, because treasury single account is an important functionality where the treasuries interact with the central bank for payments to the bank accounts. And this is where the interoperability between the central bank system and the FMIS is not that great. Still little more than half, but still there is a long way to go. Next slide, please. Coming to the other point about evolving needs. As countries have, the technology has evolved, the needs have evolved. Minister of Finance needs have evolved as they're implementing different, the cutting edge functions like performance budgeting, active cash management, or even going towards nowcasting for macro fiscal forecasts. So these functions, as they're evolving, the systems are not able to catch up, and they're not able to support these modern functions. So that's because of the legacy systems and some of the rigidities of the legacy systems. And then let me also explain a little bit. As systems are evolving, one should look at the 3 stages of systems evolution. The first is, as countries started in the beginning, largely they tried to digitalize the existing manual functions, which is called digitization, basically replicating any existing manual process through a digitalizing that manual process. Then they move towards, gradually countries can move towards digitalization, where you make the process digital by default. What does it mean? Is basically that a lot of processes you can automate. They don't have to go through manual interventions when not be needed. So that is kind of so by default you look at the processes which can be automated. So that's digitalization. Then at the third stage, you move to digital transformation, where it's digital by design, which means that when we look at in a digital environment, a lot of the existing processes can be transformed and can be re-engineered to get the optimal value of digitalization. So that's the final stage of digital transformation. So largely countries are started with digitization, and many of them are already in digitalization phase, but few countries are still moving to be at the digital transformation phase, which this guidelines will help you to go towards. Next slide, please. Now, as part of the survey we did, apart from these 3 issues which I highlighted, there are also other concerns which came to the fore. One was about when the development of the systems take place, enough attention is actually not given to make them user-centric. User-centric doesn't mean just for the external users, but a lot of it is actually should be focused on internal users. And that is one of the reasons why also many of the systems do not deliver, because when in the PFM area, there are a lot of stakeholders, not just the Ministry of Finance, but there are also line ministries, other ministries like Ministry of Planning and Investment, Central Bank. So all these stakeholders have to be taken into account, particularly their needs and their challenges they face. They have to use these systems, and the system design should keep that in mind to make it user-centric. So this is something I think a concern came about, that adequate attention is perhaps not given yet. The second concern is many of these systems, FMIS, which are in place, a lot of the outputs of these systems are focused on legally required, compliance-focused reports, but they don't really cater to the needs for data-driven decision-making, because governments capture a lot of data, but they don't make best use of this data. So there is a long way, actually, when you digitalize, you can actually use the technology to make much better use of data. And this is an area where a lot of work still needs to be done. The third area, which again links to data, data is still captured not in one's only way, but I think there are multiple sources of data, but they're captured redundantly. And when you capture in redundant way, there are inconsistencies across data sets for the same information. You may be capturing in different formats, and the granularity may not be enough for data-driven decision making. So that is another area where work needs to be done. So data is key, and this is actually the PFM digitalization guidelines. We focused a lot on the data aspects, which is key for all decision making in the PFM. Next slide, please. So now I will just briefly highlight a little bit the framework itself, and then I'll pass on to Lorena to talk in detail about the framework. So when we talk about these guidelines, what they are, so this is basically, as I said, a framework for digital PFM, and it covers three aspects of digital PFM, and they have to be looked at holistically. First is the core functional aspects. When you digitalize PFM, you look at PFM functions and sub functions. So that is the first dimension. The second is the architectural underlying technology, the IT architectural aspects. The third is, again, very important. You may have the best technology, you may have designed your functions well, but the systems ultimately have to be the IT projects have to be implemented in a way, in an environment which provides the sound governance and management practices. So this is the third dimension, governance and management. So that guidelines cover these three pillars, and it actually then goes even more granular, giving a detailed view for the practitioners with functional attributes under each pillar. Next slide, please. So who are the target audience of these guidelines? So it actually can cater to a variety of audience. First is the policymakers and the decision makers. At least for them, they need high level guidance from the guidelines. So this is where the framework, providing the holistic picture of pillars, principles, and attributes, can help the policymakers and decision makers to take appropriate decisions. Whereas for the practitioners, they can look in detail to the framework, the attributes, and the different practices under the attributes. So those are for the practitioners. Now, as I said, because it covers three pillars, functional pillar, IT pillar, and the governance and management pillar, these are covered in the guidelines. But again, the functions themselves, the PFM functions, which are about 11 functions we have identified, and sub-functions, they will be further elaborated in a handbook, which we are working on at the IMF. And that handbook will come very handy, not only for the policymakers, but also the practitioners when they design the systems and implement the systems for digitalization. And one of the key aspects of the guidelines is that how to use the guidelines to assess your current landscape. This is where we have come up with what we call the Digital Solutions Guidelines Implementation Tool, or DIGIT. This DIGIT can be used to assess the current state of digitalization landscape in any country, and identify gaps and opportunities, which can then feed into your design using the framework, and then going into the handbook, which we are working on to go towards the functionalities and detailed aspects of the system. Next slide, please. So how we develop the guidelines. So since keeping these users in mind, we had extensive consultations during the process of development. And this development took place over the last, I would say, 2.5 years. And it was a very collaborative process, and not only within the IMF, but also we reached out to various other development partners like the World Bank and OECD and several other, also to industry. Some of the industry were working with governments for digitalizing public sector. But also during the annual and spring meetings of the IMF, we also reached out to some of the other stakeholders like civil society organizations, etc. And we ran several workshops because once we came up with some sort of a draft, we actually went out to various regions, including in Asia, Africa and Latin America, and we conducted about 3 regional workshops covering more than 30 countries. And those workshops actually were very, very helpful to test the draft and to come up and give us useful insights to further refine the guidelines. So it was an extensive consultant process to take into account the needs of various stakeholders and users. Next slide, please. So the objective, what is the objective of the guidelines? So the guidelines can be used, as I said, first to assess where you are. The existing PFM digital solutions and the associated governance and management practices to basically identify gaps and the strengths you have. Once you have assessed, then the guidelines can be used to help with the design of the PFM IT systems and also develop roadmaps and strategies for digital transformation. But again, and after the design, then you can go for implementation. But again, design and implementation need to go together because it's kind of reiterative process. So as you start implementing, you may find new needs, so you can further improve the design. So this is where we say this is a kind of a 3-stage approach: assess, design, and improve in an iterative process. Next slide. So the guidelines are basically have about 4 levels, actually, I would say. So first level is, as I said, covers 3 pillars. First is functional, second is IT architectural, third is governance and management. And under each pillar, we have 6 principles. And for each principle, we have about 4 attributes. So in functional, we have 13 principles, and in IT architectural, we have 10, and in governance and management pillar, we have 15. For each attribute, we have 3 levels of practices: foundational, intermediate, and advanced. So this is a 4-level guidelines, and it takes account of, because of this 3 levels of maturity, takes account of the country context and capacity so that you can progress as you go along digitalizing PFM. Next slide. So this is how it looks. You will hear from Lorena in detail about each of these pillars and each of these principles and attributes under each of these principles. So as I said, each has 6 principles. Each pillar has 6 principles. Next slide. So before handing over to Lorena, maybe a little bit, I will also dwell on how the important point to keep in mind here is that while these guidelines cover 3 pillars, you have to look at these 3 pillars in a holistic way because they are interrelated. Just to give this slide, as you see, many a times when governments start developing an FMIS or coming up developing a digital solution in PFM, they mostly look at functions. But functions you have to look at functions along with the enablers, what is the underlying technology which can enable digitalizing these functions. So IT architectural pillar, which is in the background you see behind functions. Then similarly, you have to also look at the governance and management practices within the government. So those are enablers. If those are not in place, the best functional design may not be able to deliver what you are expecting. So just to give a little bit of an example, in the functional side, when you look at, as I said, the data is the thrust of these guidelines. When the data is captured, unless data is captured appropriately and stored appropriately, you cannot really use them properly for decision making or disclosing in a transparent manner the information to the public, for example. But again, data capture is linked to how the data architecture is conceived. So therefore, there is a symbiotic relationship, as you see, within the functional pillar itself, within data architecture and data capture. Then going beyond functional, the data architecture also has a relationship with, for example, IT architectural, the pragmatic principle, which talks about once only attribute. So that is where the once only principle is important for data capture. So that is links to data capture, and data architecture links to pragmatic principle under IT architectural pillar. Similarly, the data capture also, and data architecture also links to data governance under the governance and management principle, because good data governance laws and the legal framework and the institutional framework for data governance is important to ensure proper data architecture and data capture. So just to give a little bit of flavor how these various pillars are interrelated. Even beyond these three pillars, when systems have to be developed, digital solutions have to be developed, you have to look at these three pillars, how they relate to the different layers, for example, data layer, service layer, and the solutions layer. So this is where, again, the interactions or interconnections are important. And the previous slide where I mentioned the assess, design, and improve, when you look at these three pillars and you keep in mind these interconnections, so when you work on digital solutions, there will be continuing feedback on what is working, what is not working, and that feedback should be taken into account in further improving, the design and implementation. So just to give a flavor that this is one of the important things to keep in mind, to look at the digital solutions in a very holistic way, and to keep in mind, be aware of the interactions among these three pillars, and also with the broader PFM digitalization landscape. So I'll stop there, and then I'll hand over to Lorena to go into details of each of these pillars and principles and attributes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And hi, everyone. It's very nice to see you all. We all know each other already. So I'm going to head directly to, as Eleanor was mentioning, we have the 3 levels of maturity in our 3 pillars, right? So that is the framework. And when we talk about the framework, this is what we're talking about. The digitalization guidelines are exactly this. And as mentioned, these are complementary attributes and they have their levels of maturity. So I will just go very fast across the levels of maturity to give you a flavor of how they work and what is the idea behind these levels of maturity and how this actually relates to fiscal transparency. Because if we have good systems, if we have good processes, if we have good data, then we have good fiscal transparency. So now that we have our functional pillar and we have our principles that we have here, and we have our attributes, I'm trying to get my annotation. Okay, no, I was trying to annotate here. Okay, and we have our principles here that are the process transformation, data capture, data architecture, all the 6 that you saw before. And we have our levels of maturity, foundational, intermediate, and advanced. So how does that work? What is this for? So that if we are looking at a process, let's say, we see whether our process has been transformed for digital adoption, for the digital transformation, or if we're actually just replicating the manual process and we could actually optimize our processes for better use of the digital tools that are already out there. And we see the level of progression from foundational, intermediate, and advanced. Now, when you're looking at the guidelines after the session, and hopefully you will download them and make use of them, you're going to see that the advanced level is a bit aspirational. Aspirational, why? Because technology is evolving, and sometimes the systems that we have right now, and we are going to hear from the governments, and we have 2 governments that are going to present right now, they have done great strides in improving their systems. However, this is an ongoing process. Systems never finish to evolve because technology continues to evolve, processes continue to evolve. And what we're aiming at is that countries can look at what they should be aiming at, and that they don't have to go to the digitization, then digitalization, and then digital transformation. What about we say we're going to start the new digital transformation process of public investments management? Oh, then let's look at the advanced. Can we get to the advanced directly? Or what steps do we need to take? And that's where we look at these three pillars, because it's not just about the functional, it's about the IT architecture and the governance pillar. In these functional attributes, we have, in the handbook, we have broken them down for 11 PFM functions. So you won't see just these, for example, I will focus on one of our favorites for fiscal transparency, that can be data architecture and interoperability. That is whether you have the correct codes and catalogs. You won't just see this, you will see this tailored for the management, for public investments management, and so forth. So we have done that homework to provide which are the codes and catalogs that you would need to have in each of these functions for foundational, intermediate, and advanced. And also in the interoperability, we talk a lot about the biggest concern of countries is the lack of interoperability. So we also place a lot of emphasis on that, and how good data architectures, the codes, and the relationships among systems will allow us to have a thing that we talk about a lot in GIFT, and we have here that dissemination of fiscal transparency portals. Now, to note for civil society here, we consider the open by default, the timely publication, and the progressive disclosure as part of our information transparency. So we're looking at how each of the functions should have a progressive disclosure of information. We're not just talking about the generation of reports, we're going beyond that already. So now I'm just going to show you the same structure we have for the IT architectural principles, so the foundational, intermediate, and advanced. And these will talk about how flexible our system is, how we are adopting new technologies. So we here go to the IT architectural. So if you don't have your IT person in this session, tell them to also read the guidelines. This is a joint effort between the functional areas, budget areas, but also the IT areas. And that's why I'm so glad that we have here from DBM and Argentina, both from the IT departments, but that are very close to the functional areas as well. And finally, for the governance and maturity, we have the same thing: foundational, intermediate, and advanced. However, what you're going to see here is that we have the legal framework, the strategic vision. This is much more conceptual, but also very pragmatic. For example, does the e-procurement allow us to have a more agile procurement of digital components? Because sometimes we can't update our systems because our procurement process is very slow or very rigid. So here we look at, from the legal framework perspective, is this allowing the digitalization to happen? So I want to encourage you to just look at each of these levels of maturity. It's a lot, so I won't delve on each of them. I just selected them in random. Maybe I will just emphasize here that we have in the legal framework the transparency in digital form. Why transparency in digital form? We look at access to information, which is like the very basic foundational element. It's not just about having a portal, but also having the legal foundation that allows access to information. But also that the access to information requires a proactive publication of information. So we go from the foundational to the advanced on things that we have been talking with GIFT Network for a lot of time. How do you make information meaningful and that can be useful? But from these very basics that are the right to access to information, you might have a very pretty portal, but your access to information is not there, then you're not even in the foundational here. So with that, I think we can pass to the country presentations. We have selected 2 countries, one that has used the guidelines. We have DBM here, and we have one that has not officially used the guidelines, but we have the fortune of having involvement with the IT department that has worked a lot with GIFT. So Marianne, that you're moderating, please, I leave you to it.
Thank you, Lorena, and thank you, Sulendra, for your very comprehensive and illuminating discussion on the guidelines. And congratulations again on the publication of this very important resource that provides us with a very clear roadmap for improving digital solutions in PFM. The snapshots on global trends on embracing digital PFM, fiscal data exchange, and interoperability of FMISs are particularly very interesting to me. And the framework you presented for incorporating technology into and within PFM architectures offers a very structured and strategic approach to digital transformation. And it really highlights a structured path forward for us to not only adopt and apply these innovative solutions, but also to ensure that they are aligned with our broader goals of fiscal responsibility and transparency, uh, with a focus on user-centric design. And this is very crucial in ensuring that the effectiveness of our public financial management systems. And you mentioned we have two country presentations, one that have applied and piloted these guidelines. So speaking of practical applications, we're here and we can start with a presentation of the Philippines, where we know these guidelines have been piloted and whose representative is joining us at a very, very late hour in the night. I think it's already 11 p.m. So thank you, USEC Maria Francesca Del Rosario. We're very grateful that you're dedicating overtime work for us to share the Philippine experience. So without further ado, I now pass on the floor to you. I believe you have shared a new presentation, but I haven't had the time to
Yeah,
download it yet. So
I
maybe,
will just share it on my
okay,
end. All right,
all right.
thank you. Hi everyone. My name is Sasa. It's it's late here in Manila, but I'm happy to share with you everyone that we've been using the guidelines set forth by Lorena and Selender's team. Actually we've been using it like a I call this like our like a Google Maps, when you're going somewhere, you have to turn right, turn left, and so on. These guidelines are actually like that. And it tells you, when you're going to arrive in your destination. So um I'll I'll just share it with you some brief updates that we have in the past at least months that I think this is something that hasn't also been updated to the IMF and GIF team. I will also briefly share with you what we have presented in Estonia on open government, which is the digital imagery and monitoring and evaluation solution that we have in the Philippines. So we have been using a lot of we were getting a lot of use cases from our stakeholders. So we're getting, these are just samples, no, the challenges, and then we're getting some opportunities in terms of PFM and how we can improve on the lives of the well, our not just our budget officers, but ultimately our stakeholders, our customers or line agencies, no. So we are tracking each and every step or process that we have in the department and also in the bureaucracy. So we kind of we're like doctors, no, we get to diagnose what the problem is and then provide a solution or medications to how we can, I think, we can improve their lives using technical tools. So in terms of how we are designing it, basically we just get them what they want, what they need and what the pain points are, what are their requests. So what we are doing is we're getting everything from them, and then we strategize on our own in terms of internally how we can do let's say in which release this particular automation project will be out for them to use and so on and so forth. Silender mentioned about having a good foundation in terms of data governance. So for the Philippines, we are running on a very how would I call it, complicated structure called unified account code structure. So all of the government transactions should have a corresponding code. So Those are the things that we're also looking at. But we there's also sense of we got a lot of sentiments from the ground that it's hard to memorize the codes. So we'll like a do reference management wherein we'll make it as convenient as possible for the budget folks to and stakeholders to really see the codes that they need without even memorizing them. So those are the things that we're doing. And we're actually part of our mandate is budget cycle analytics. But before we do analytics, we have to clean up the data first, right? Garbage in, garbage out. So we'll have to, as I mentioned, as was mentioned and been hammering by IMF to us is to really have a clean data. So what we're doing right now is actually first is have the data engineers, data scientists to look into our data, have the visualization first, and then look into how what we have, then how we can clean it up, and then provide a data warehouse and data environment wherein we do like our self-service data marts for our budget officers to use moving forward. So we just procured data visualization tools, data fabric, and so on. And then here is like some samples of what we have, like at least 4 dashboards that the all the DBM employees can utilize, like from the expenditure to execution. But note that these are just visualization tools coming from the current data and systems that we have. So cleaning them up is another thing, no? So for us, it's just a matter of you just have to let them see what and how data can do to their lives, and then before we even clean it up, before because for me it's it's a good thing that they see something before we it's make it's like a teaser, like a trailer in a movie. And you have to tease people like, oh, this is what data can do. It makes your lives easier as I know, as an employee. Um, this is something that I've been presenting. It's like really a coreless one that having several APIs all over the place, and then having the data out there and using back end automation and front end automation. Um, Front end automation for the user experience one. And then back end in terms of really fixing the data from the back. It can mean that we are capturing data from transactions, from the core, and actually replicating it in a different environment, and that will actually provide us a 360 degree of what data that we have, and then eventually use this data for API, either one we're focusing first on utilizing API internally, and then moving forward, and we can expose our APIs externally. But for now we're developing it. We're preparing um for the microservices to happen first. So this is like this is our API team. Basically, it's an ad hoc team that we just upskilled and trained our internal DBM employees to do API, to and to also um these are non-technical. Most of us are non-technical folks, and then we just trained them how to deploy APIs. And then they thought, they just realized, it's easy to do it anyway. So we're actually reskilling folks internally for this one. So what we did is the API platform is just we procured an API platform because I think it's more secure to do it. Like unlike having multiple APIs all over the place, and then it's hard to secure them all at once. So we're just looking at one platform, then everything will be managed through that. This is the backend robotics process optimization, and this is the team that we're mapping. What's the good thing about the RPA is that it actually has an inherent functionality for data fabric. So the data that are being captured in within this platform are actually managed, so we can really see what we really have in terms of data. And then while part of it, a huge chunk of it is that we're capturing the budget process in the while we're doing this, because once we capture all the data, it's naturally we capture the process that we have to automate. So it's like a two-in-one project lumped into one. This is the front end automation project. We're actually using this is based on experience. We're using OutSystems as the for front end automation. One is because it's more convenient, and it's we're mapping out the requirements. The picture in the middle are folks from our legislation team. So I mean from Congress. So we're getting their insights as well. So how the budget process in terms of legislation in the legislation cycle will work. So we're capturing how they want to see the budget and so on. So what how OutSystems can do it is it actually can just do anything. Like if you want it in Excel or Word or in PDF, it can generate into that, and then can have a workflow updates. Can also do notification where is the backlog already, and do turnaround time or aging terms of that. So how we were doing it is when we were launching a project, we let everyone know that we have this because in terms of technology and what I've also learned in the training is that there has to be constant communication with our stakeholders or with our employees every time we do something new, or we launch something new, because everyone has to be on board. And then since these are new, you always have to constantly engage them, because there's this especially in the Philippines, there's this fear of tech replacing people. So these tools are not supposed to replace people. These are supposed to help them do their job. So having that kind of constant communication actually helps, um well, at least in our case, DBM employees. You've seen this already, but I just wanted to amplify that we have an architecture that the reason why we're buying every tool that we have is because we're basing this on the architecture that we set forth prior. So we don't wanna we want to leverage what we have existing, and by using new technology, we can integrate all of them, and that's our version of integrated financial management information system. Ultimately, I just wanted to also highlight one of the things that will benefit out of this once we have good data, API, and so on, would be transparency. So this is the digital imagery for monitoring and evaluation. So this is our M&E flagship project. So we will be using a lot of satellite images. This together with another agency we call Philippine Space Agency. So they will be providing us with imagery via API. So it's just a matter of connecting everything with one platform. So everything is kind of strategic. So what we're doing is we're actually purchasing and leveraging on platforms, and not build mini applications. So everything will be onboarded in just at least single platform. So which we call conversion hub. But because ultimately this is something that we've also learned in the trainings with the IMF, like having an enterprise bus. wherein, everything has to be connected there, not necessarily building new ones that may be siloed in foreseeable future. So with that, I think my 10-minute thing is already over. I bring it up to Marianne for more.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Yusek Sasa, for showcasing the Philippine experience and your FMIS journey. The Philippines has always been a leader in PFM reforms in Asia and at the global level. So it's always great learning from your successes and also hearing about the challenges you face, specifically pointing out the difficulty and the challenge of cleaning data sets and then visualizing data thereafter. I know it's now I think 11:30 on your end, so I'd like again to express our biggest thanks to you for sharing your experience tonight. Congratulations on all the amazing innovations that you shared, and we can't wait to hear more updates and follow your digital transformation journey from here onwards. Now, from Southeast Asia, let's fly to the Americas. At this point, it's my pleasure to introduce Gustavo Merino from the Argentina Ministry of Economy as Director of Development of the General Directorate of Financial Administration and Systems of Argentina's Ministry of Economy. Gustavo has played a very vital role in modernizing Argentina's PFM system. So to share insights on that, please take the floor, Gustavo. Do you want me to share your presentation?
Yeah, I going to share my presentation if I can.
Oh,
I'm going to speak in Spanish. Sorry about that, because
no worries.
it will be easier for me. I'm sharing my presentation now. Let's see if I could. Is everything okay?
You can see it? Yes. Go ahead.
You can see it? Okay.
Yes.
So let's start. I'm going to speak in Spanish. So, vamos a ver. I'm going to speak slowly, but in Spanish. Vamos a un poco a repasar cómo nosotros en Argentina estamos encarando gradualmente un proceso de modernización en nuestros sistemas de administración financiera. Básicamente nosotros hoy en Argentina tenemos un sistema de administración financiera que está basado, digamos, o utilizado por toda la Administración Pública Nacional, e incluso tenemos instalaciones en 3 provincias de nuestro país. Ese sistema, si bien es un sistema que nosotros consideramos fuerte, es de amplio uso por todas las entidades, interopera, como vamos a ver, con un montón de entidades y de otros sistemas de la administración pública, como puede ser con los sistemas de contrataciones o de inversión pública o algunos otros sistemas que son utilizados por los distintos organismos. Es un sistema que tiene, digamos, alguna obsolescencia tecnológica, y por otro lado, por lo cual tenemos que encarar un proceso de actualización, pero por otro lado, tenemos muchos desafíos que enfrentamos actualmente y necesitamos prepararnos para, de alguna manera, satisfacer estas demandas. A nivel social hay mayores demandas ciudadanas por mejores servicios, mejores políticas públicas, mayor transparencia. A nivel interno, obviamente, para poder satisfacer esas demandas sociales se demanda mejor eficiencia, mayor posibilidad de poseer información para afrontar toma de decisiones cada vez más complejas y en un entorno, particularmente en nuestro país, muy desafiante. Por otro lado, tenemos obviamente en cuenta toda la aceleración de cambios tecnológicos que nos proporcionan de alguna manera nuevas oportunidades. A su vez, tenemos, o por lo menos hemos estado teniendo muchos ataques a nivel a nivel de ciberseguridad en distintos sistemas del sector público, no en el nuestro. Hemos tenido ataques, pero no los hemos podido, digamos, repeler, pero en otros organismos han sufrido ataques, digamos, bastante importantes a nivel de seguridad. Por otro lado, desde el punto de vista estratégico o desde el punto de vista de lo que es la construcción y el mantenimiento de estos sistemas, de alguna manera los cambios en el mercado laboral, sobre todo en Haití, han, digamos, llevado a que la dinámica de trabajo sea totalmente distinta, donde los recursos humanos tienen una mucho mayor rotación, tienen cada vez mayor demandas y de alguna manera las organizaciones públicas nos tenemos que adaptar a eso. Y por otro lado, tenemos algunos desafíos tecnológicos de nuestro sistema. Este sistema que tenemos hoy es un sistema que, si bien tiene distintas aplicaciones, la aplicación principal, que acá se llama, digamos, SIDIF, donde se cursan todas las transacciones, es una aplicación con una estructura monolítica, con todos los problemas que tiene una arquitectura monolítica. El alto costo de sincronización, el costo de tener que probar toda la aplicación cada vez que se hace un cambio y demás. A su vez, esa estructura monolítica nos ha traído algunos problemas de obsolescencia, y esos problemas de obsolescencia son cada vez más difíciles de resolver si no encaramos una adecuación de nuestros sistemas. A su vez, el tamaño y el costo de la infraestructura, de los servidores y del hardware necesario para sostener este sistema, digamos, no está optimizado. Si bien nosotros tenemos muchos usuarios y la infraestructura lo soporta, la única manera de asegurar la escalabilidad es agregando servidores físicamente, por más que haya soluciones de virtualización. Y por el lado de la solución de inteligencia de negocios, nosotros tenemos una solución de inteligencia de negocios, pero que tiene algunas debilidades, en el sentido de que hay muchos datos que no están reflejados en el sistema de administración financiera, que son datos externos, que tienen que ver con proyecciones o variables macroeconómicas, que nuestro sistema de inteligencia y negocio tiene dificultades para una integración sostenida, y entonces eso hace que se termine utilizando el sistema de inteligencia de negocio para exportar información que se termina trabajando vía Excel. Entonces, de alguna manera, todos estos desafíos nos obligan a prepararnos para tener desafíos constantes y tratar de tener una estrategia proactiva, no solamente estando abiertos a los cambios tecnológicos, sino pensar en una transformación digital de la administración pública. ¿Por qué? Porque estas demandas, que cada vez son mayores y más cambiantes, tenemos que construir sistemas que puedan dar respuesta a esas demandas. En ese sentido, nosotros estamos pensando, bueno, ¿qué es lo que tenemos que proponer u ofrecer bajo esta nueva generación, como le llamamos nosotros, de sistemas de administración financiera? Nosotros tenemos que estar preparados para ofrecer servicios bajo demanda, para desplegar soluciones con agilidad, para escalar en potencia y funcionalidad, y para generar productos que estén enfocados fuertemente en la entrega de valor a los usuarios, tanto los usuarios internos de la administración pública, las autoridades políticas, así como los ciudadanos, que son en el fondo los, digamos, usuarios finales a los cuales nosotros como servidores públicos estamos obligados a satisfacer. Entonces, en ese sentido, desde el punto de vista tecnológico, nos planteamos un proyecto donde de alguna manera estamos tratando de intervenir en 4 ejes. El del lado de la infraestructura, gestionando la infraestructura en un modo que sea más flexible, escalable, yendo hacia una infraestructura de nube. Del lado de la arquitectura, pasando de monolítico a microservicios, que es un poco lo que comentaba Lorena con los pilares de digamos, de transformación digital que estuvimos viendo ahí hace un ratito, con fuerte enfoque en la interoperabilidad y con un fuerte enfoque en ciberseguridad. Desde el punto de vista de metodologías, integrar las metodologías ágiles en todo el proceso de desarrollo, no solamente, perdón, en el desarrollo específico de sistemas, que nosotros ya lo estábamos usando, sino también en la relación con los usuarios. Empezar a trabajar el problema y toda la solución pensando en la rápida entrega de valor, involucrando a los usuarios en esa metodología ágil para, de alguna manera, lograr esa transformación digital de procesos. Muchas veces nosotros estamos acostumbrados a recibir el requerimiento que no sabemos cuál es el problema. El requerimiento viene, necesito agregar una columna en tal reporte. Y uno va y lo hace, y la columna se agrega. Pero nunca se sabe cuál es el problema que se quiere resolver. Entonces, de alguna manera, integrando al usuario en el proceso de definición, lo que queremos es tratar de transformar digitalmente ese proceso o encontrar ese problema y encontrar juntos la mejor solución. Y por último, utilizar fuertemente o ir fuertemente hacia una organización basada en datos que nos permita facilitar la analítica de datos robustos. Ahora vamos a ver un poquito más en detalle esto. Bueno, esto más o menos
Sorry,
lo
hello, Gustavo. Yes,
sí,
sorry to interrupt. Sorry, we're running out of time. If we can fast track the discussions and wrap up, that would be great. Thank you.
ok. Voy a acelerar un poquito. Entonces, un poquito tenemos, como les comentaba, vamos a ir hacia una infraestructura de nube. En lo que es arquitectura, pasamos a arquitectura de microservicios, un fuerte enfoque en ciberseguridad, metodologías, tratando de incorporar metodologías ágiles y centradas en el usuario. Y esto es muy importante, implementar una política de gobierno de datos, digamos, donde esté de alguna manera garantizado que los datos que se utilizan en el sistema tienen una sustentabilidad y una sostenibilidad en el tiempo que permita consolidar y gestionar información y utilizar esos datos para empezar a hacer analítica predictiva y prospectiva a través del uso de inteligencia artificial y machine learning. Y que haya analítica embebida. Básicamente, esta era la vieja generación, este del medio sería el sistema actual que tenemos y nos imaginamos un conjunto de aplicaciones orientadas al usuario. No pensamos solo en aplicaciones, queremos que los usuarios logren resultados, queremos transformar digitalmente esos procesos. Queremos que el servicio que brindemos no sea el mismo para todos, sino que lo podamos, digamos, de alguna manera tunear para los distintos usuarios, facilitar el trabajo de los usuarios, pensar en algún asistente, hasta incluso un asistente normativo que permita resolver cuestiones relacionadas con la administración financiera, integrarnos a través de API Gateway, reusar datos del sector público, no hacer que los ciudadanos o que las empresas tengan que registrar los datos N veces cuando ya los tienen registrados en alguna agencia del sector público. Enfocarnos en la entrega de valor y en buscar soluciones con los usuarios, como ya los decía, estar abiertos al aprendizaje, investigar qué hacen otros, colaborar con otros equipos, flexibilizar el armado de equipos en la integración, ir hacia un proceso, esto ya más técnico, de integración continua, de fuerte testing automático para poder ser más ágiles y resolver mejor los problemas. Y bueno, estos serían un poco los beneficios que vemos nosotros en este proceso de nueva generación, que de alguna manera ya lo empezamos, digamos, hemos creado algunos productos, hay un producto que creamos que permite monitorear el proceso de formulación presupuestaria, donde las autoridades, el secretario de Hacienda, el subsecretario de Presupuesto, el ministro, de alguna manera pueden ir viendo el avance de ese proceso que es bastante demandante en cuanto a tiempos, porque no solamente hay una cuestión financiera, sino que hay una cuestión de información que los organismos tienen que entregar para poder realizar la oficina de presupuesto, el proyecto de ley de presupuesto. Otro proceso que implementamos es el de pagos por transferencias inmediatas, y bueno, un poco en eso estamos trabajando y digamos, las guías de de digitalización del fondo nos permiten de alguna manera saber que estamos orientados y que más o menos todo el mundo está orientado en algo, o estamos orientados en algo que se está viendo en todo el mundo. Les agradezco infinitamente la invitación y la atención a la presentación. Disculpas por hablar en español y a lo último aceleré, así que les pido disculpas de nuevo. Bueno, y quedo abierto a preguntas, consultas y demás. Gracias.
Now we're just going to go very quickly on how we can implement the guidelines and how our assessment tool. Chloe, can you share the screen very quickly? Gustavo was just mentioning the process that they're taking on applying sort of the steps to modernize their architecture and their systems. So as you could hear them in practice, in the guidelines, we have a 10-step process to assess, design, improve the processes and technology and the governance attributes. And we have a tool for assessing your systems. And that is something that Chloe has been working a lot on. Chloe has worked on this very nice tool that is available for countries that want to request from the IMF support or want to use it by themselves as well. But Chloe, very quickly, we can go through digits because it's a lot, right? The guidelines are a lot. We have 3 levels of maturity for 6 principles and 3 pillars, 30 attributes. It's a lot. So we needed a tool to implement. And this is the tool. Chloe.
All right, so as Lorena just outlined, we're going to quickly showcase the tool called DIGIT, Digital Solutions Guideline Implementation Tool, that supports the application of the guidelines by helping with the first step of assessing the current state of PFM digital solutions. So DIGIT is an interactive tool that can help you sort of systematically assess the functional coverage, interoperability, and levels of maturity for each pillar, again, based on the guidelines. As shown on the right here, for the first pillar, which is for functional, you can select to focus on a few PFM functions. And in fact, that's recommended because of, as Lorena said, it is a lot that's covered in the guidelines. For the first 2 types of assessments, however, so for coverage and interoperability, all 11 PFM functions that are covered in the guidelines are assessed to provide an overview of the overall digital ecosystem. So this shows what the assessment sheets look like. For coverage, you simply indicate which sub-functions are covered, partially covered, or not covered at the current state. And for interoperability, you just sort of check which systems are interoperable with each other. And this includes not just the sort of main PFM functions, but other relevant systems such as central bank systems. For maturity level, again, we discussed the framework for each of the pillar. It's done at it's assessed for different things at different levels, but for each of the attribute, you get these tables that are very similar to what Lorena showed earlier that describe each attribute at 3 levels of progression. And essentially, you indicate whether, and if you have not met the foundational level for one attribute, that you can select not met, or at which of the 3 levels you would be at for all functional, IT architectural, and governance and management attributes. So as you complete your assessment, the tool, DIGIT, consolidates and summarizes the results in a visual way in real time. So these are some sort of screenshots from the summary reports that you would get for a simple assessment. And they really provide a clear overview of the current state of, again, both the overall landscape in terms of coverage and interoperability, as well as for individual solutions and their maturity levels. And they help you identify strengths and weaknesses to move on to the next phases in the assess, design, improve strategy that was shown quickly in the earlier slide. So for example, you may have good functional coverage, but have interoperability challenges. You may be lagging behind in a specific pillar or specific attribute like interoperability and cybersecurity that we talked about, that Gustavo talked about. And based on these strengths and weaknesses that you identify, you can also identify areas for improvement and use that to devise a strategy that balance these various efforts based on your priorities. So these are some potential sort of recommendations or actions that a team from the IMF, for example, may make based on an assessment done by Digit. And this illustrates further how some of these recommendations from the previous slide can be linked to the summary reports, and again, how the visual representation that's provided by the tool can really help in this regard. For example, on the right for governance and management pillar, you may see that data governance principle or attributes under the data governance principle have not met at the foundational level. So you may want to focus on developing a comprehensive cross-government data governance framework. And lastly, as a sort of last step to using the tool, you will pull these together, so these different recommendations or actions or specific initiatives, to come up with an action plan that, again, will guide your modernization efforts like those described by Sasa and Gustavo. And this sample action plan shown here, as you can see, considers the individual attributes that were identified as potential weaknesses by Digit that are sort of shown on the left. And it also follows the 10-step approach that the guidelines proposes. So again, setting the timelines based on following your objectives and priorities, and also sort of making sure that you research and analyze your digital solutions before selecting them. And based on an action plan like this that you develop using Digit and the guidelines, you can continue on designing and improving your digital solutions for PFM. So that was a very quick overview, and we're going to move on to our final sort of closing. I think I'll move on to I'll hand it over to Sailendra.
Thank you. Could you move the slide, please? Yes. So just to, I hope that you have had a very comprehensive overview of the guidelines and some of the experiences shared by Philippines and Argentina, Sasa and Gustavo. So just going forward, what I want to say is that from the IMF side, we will be very happy to collaborate with all of you on two areas. Basically, one is we will be happy to facilitate more sharing of experiences amongst various stakeholders. I mean, not just governments, but also the industry and also civil society organizations, and also countries are developing various digital solutions. Some of these could be reusable. Some of the digital components, how they can be shared across countries for as kind of better use instead of starting from scratch. The other area where we will be able to help a lot is capacity development and technical assistance, and particularly focusing using guidelines, the tool Digit, which Chloe just demonstrated, and then following this process approach of assess, design, and improve digital PFM. So we look forward to, feel free to reach out to us. And just to give a flavor, next slide, please. Just to give a flavor of the work we have done already. We have already done the workshops about, you see the pilots, when we developed the guidelines, the draft was piloted, as I said, in more than 30 countries. The list is here. And then in capacity development also, we have actually, although the guidelines are quite young, but still we have managed to go to Philippines, which as I said, and then few other countries, and in Africa, Cameroon and South America, Principe, and in Latin America also Peru. And we are also receiving more requests and interests in terms of adoption of the guidelines. So thank you all. So I will look forward to further collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lorena, Chloe, Selendra, and of course Gustavo for sharing Argentina's journey. The guidelines are indeed quite a lot to take in and to digest in such a short period of time, which we're running out of. We only have 90 minutes for this session, but maybe we can run over time for an additional 5 minutes, as I'm sure many of our participants would like to know more about how they can apply the guidelines in their work and also be able to ask questions to all of you, our panelists. So on that note, we're opening up the floor for any questions. Anyone who would like to put forward expressions of interest or ask any questions, please raise your hand and we'll be recognizing you to take the floor. I see people are commenting on the chat. Juan Pablo, yes, please go ahead.
Thank you, Jan. Thank you, colleagues, for sharing the guidelines and presenting it in a way that is practical and accessible to all of us. The question, and this is addressed to all of you, but basically inspired by the example of the DBM in the Philippines, is this is a complex, very complex issue, and of course, solutions are also complex. It couldn't be otherwise. So, how do you put together a team, or what would be the ideal team you speak to? If you could elaborate on this, because you need the technical part, but you need the resources part, and you need, of course, the political leadership part. So the question is, how can we help our friends from the network to make sure that when they call upon you, they have the right team put together in their countries? Thank you.
And I guess before we proceed to the answers, Zuki has raised a question on chat. She's curious to hear an example of the distinction between interoperability and unification of systems across government, a difference referenced in the guideline. So if someone from the panel can also address that, that would be great. Anyone who would like to start first? Lorena, Selendra, and Gustavo, you are Sasa.
So, Selendra, go ahead.
No, okay, just I wanted to quickly say, I mean, Juan Pablo, it's a very good question because the political economy is an important factor. So I think the guidelines in a way can facilitate some of the informed discussion amongst the politicians. Like if we use the digit tool to give a sort of a snapshot of the overall landscape, where are the opportunities, where are the gaps, and that available technology, etc., which I think the political, the policymakers and the decision makers will get definitely interested when they see there is something in there which can help them, to progress on what they're trying to do. But then, in terms of the team, the specific question you asked, I think the team has to be an interdisciplinary team, and this is where actually during the workshop which we did, we brought together not just the functional people, but also the IT people. Because a lot of the things, they are kind of, there is a symbiotic relationship, as I said, So you can't look at only one aspect, you have to look at it holistically. So therefore, you have to involve the users also, the key users, all these digital solutions have to be user-centric. So you have to involve the key users. So it has to be interdisciplinary team. I think maybe the Philippines, they have some experience in doing that. And so I will leave to Sasa if she wants to add something, but Lorena also, if you want to add something.
Yes, Sasa, you want to chime in?
Yeah, this is where I'll amplify. Hello, can you hear me? Sorry. This is where
Go ahead, ma'am.
I would amplify my statement earlier that, constant strategic communications for digital transformation, especially on the PFM, because the people, especially in the Philippines, they're used to, to the manual things, way of life. And then you're introducing this to this new thing. And then what I've also learned during the IMF training is that um you in terms of having that emotional psyche of people involved is that it's really like the 7 stages of grief. So you have to always have that
스티브가
at the back of
있고
your head
그래서
that
yes.
it's you know, you have to manage these individuals and the politics side of things is something way beyond us. So what we do usually we usually leverage on is, since we constantly communicate with folks, this something also would have to it has also another purpose of having our principals and having our leaders know what we are actually doing, and having that kind of political leverage or equity that you know, we're doing it the right way. And then we have development partners with us. We have, you know, this digital solutions guidelines um uh we have in place. So we know we think we know what we're doing, and we have you know, the village to help us with this. So that's I think what I can contribute here.
Thanks, Yusek Sasa. Maybe Lorena and Gustavo, you can also add on that, and then also share an example of the distinction between interoperability and unification, as Zuki has raised in the chat. Thanks.
Can I just to close on this one, and I wanted to go into Suki's question, because this part of who to have, I think it's been very well addressed. Just probably one important thing about the guidelines is that sometimes we hear, oh, we don't have the data because the system is not good. But what about the system is not good? So what the guidelines do is allow us to break down the system into its different elements and actually identify where a problem lies. And then it's easier to identify who you need to involve. Sometimes it's not even the functional and the IT people. We know that sometimes it's a procurement problem. So when we identify these very specific elements, then it's easier to involve the correct stakeholders. So additional to this multidisciplinary approach, I also want to mention this. And on the interoperability versus unification, before, when the FMIS started, this idea that you needed to build everything inside of one unique system started to gain momentum. So these systems in which you say, we're going to have this IFMIS that covers everything and take 10 years to make, that is the unification. Interoperability gives us another option, and as Sasa was mentioning a lot, how do we correctly develop our APIs to have a coreless that allows us to keep the data without being duplicated, without having any problems of inadequacy of the codes and catalogs and so forth. But so how do we keep the core? However, that we interoperate, we allow the exchange of data among these systems. We would get very technical, but Gustavo mentioned a lot about the microservices. So now the more technology has evolved, the less we aim at having these monstrous systems that take 10 years to develop, and we move more towards the development of the pieces that allow the systems to function. So you're going to see that in the IT architectural principle of the first two parts of adaptability and flexibility. So if an IT area follows that part, they would be aiming at not going to this unification and more towards an interoperability.
I want to add one thing, that you can have an architecture with microservices, but from the user you can have only one or two or three the screens or now the applications, for example, say everyone's use Netflix. Netflix is developed in an architecture, in a microservice architecture that behind the screen that you are using, there are a lot of different applications that are interoperating together to bring you the service of watching movies and watching your preference and all of that. And that's the way that the systems are being built now. So the difference is technical, but it's very important because this kind of new architectures allows you to add and to change functions and to add more facilities in a very in an easier way than in the past. That's the difference.
Thank you very much. I think that very much practically addresses our questions from the floor. Thanks very much again to our panelists. And unfortunately, in the interest of time, I would have to cut our exchange for now. Apologies if we're not going to be able to address any additional questions. But the interest from all of you throughout the session only shows that we should definitely organize a second part of this conversation, as I know IMF is very willing to host that, and GIFT is also very willing to organize additional conversations around the topic with you. But for now, we've come to the end of the session. So again, thank you to all our speakers and participants for your valuable contributions. Today's session has definitely provided us with a wealth of knowledge and perspectives on digital PFM. And it is clear that we now live in the era of AI, machine learning, all of these tools like ChatGPT and Bard. And as these types of AI technology flourishes, we're also ushering in definitely a new era in our field where we are discovering how these tools can help us with promoting our missions of fiscal transparency, participation, and accountability in the GIFT network. And that is why this new guidelines is so important. And again, I congratulate the IMF for producing this very timely and helpful resource as we navigate a crucial juncture in the evolution of the PFM field. 1.5 hours, obviously not enough. We're barely scratching the surface. So it is imperative that we get together again in the future. In the GIFT network, we're best placed to seize opportunities like this, to get together, collaborate, innovate, and push the boundaries of what is possible with the aid of digitalization. So that is my key takeaway. We need more conversation. So this may be our last SGM session, but definitely this will not be the last time we're going to sit together to discuss digital solutions for PFM and other relevant topics. So on this note, let me close our session. Thanks once again, Silendra, Lorena, Chloe, Gustavo, you Sasa especially. It's already midnight. Thank you again, everyone, for attending our session and all other sessions of the Stewards General Meeting 2023. I wish you all a truly transformative continuation of your work. Bye, everyone. Until the next one.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Everyone.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Lorena,
Thank you.
Silendra, Chloe,
Thank you very
Gustavo. Thanks very much. Yusek
Thank
Sasa,
you too.
DBM team.
Bye
Many
bye.
DBM stayed behind until midnight. Thank you.
See you soon. Bye bye.
See you soon, everyone. Bye-bye.